Hello, I'm Patrick Lay and welcome to 7 Wonders of the Park. Today's show is all about the first 30 years of myself being a Pompey fan. I say the first 30 years, it's felt a lot longer than that sometimes, but in other ways it really only feels like 5 minutes ago when I first started going in 1990. Today I've actually selected the 7 games at Fratton Park that I consider the most memorable. The Sheffield United home game then, Easter Saturday 1990 in the old Division 2. Well, I chose that because put simply, it was the first time I ever actually saw Pompey win. I was there that afternoon, my dad and brother, and my uncle came down as well to visit from Ipswich. He went along as a neutral, but he was supporting Pompey really. But what I remember about that game was that we'd been on a good run to pull ourselves out of the relegation zone, but Sheffield United were high flying at the top of the table. Certainly looking a good bet for automatic, which they did in the end. But most people were thinking, well, if we can get a draw out of this is good stuff. But as it turned out, we went in at half-time 0-0. We came out absolutely on fire. There was Philly put us in front of a header. Chamberlain, I think, also got a header to make it 2-0. And I always remember Guy Whittingham's goal, man of the moment, player of the season. Dribbled past what seemed about at least 3 or 4 players to put it in for 3-0 in the Milton end. Absolutely unbelievable, really was. I mean, it wasn't the biggest attended game you'll ever go to, but it's one of those that really stands out for me in my first days of sort of watching Pompey play. They did actually get a couple back, but we did hang on to win 3-2, so we never seemed to make life easy. But that's the first choice for today that I remember. The Nottingham Forest game then in the FA Cup quarter-finals, 1992. Well, like most people of my age, I can remember Nottingham Forest when they were Nottingham Forest, top 6 side in the country at least, Brian Clough as their manager. It was one of those games where, going into it, it was a real plum draw, almost like our cup final that season. We were doing alright in the old Division 2 under new manager Jim Smith, and we had a good exciting young team at the time. Players like Orford, Simmons, Anderton, Darryl Powell, etc. To add to the already good list of players we'd had for a few years before. But going into the game, as I said, we were massive underdogs, even though we were playing at home. But what was really memorable about that game is the tension of it. Yeah, the tension. We actually took the lead in the first minute. There was a most bizarre goal, where a free kick came over and Mark Crosby, their goalkeeper, just literally dropped it like a wet soap, and Alan McLaughlin, on loan from Southampton at the time, would you believe, actually put us in front in the first minute. But the thing with that is we were literally hanging on for the entire game. We played really well, we were well worthy of winning in the end 1-0, but it was the most tense I can remember from the point of view of literally having to hold the lead for 90 minutes to take us into our first FA Cup semi-final since the post-war years in the heyday of the club. I remember the massive pitch invasion afterwards, all peaceful of course, but I think it was on Match of the Day that evening and Des Lynam said, I never remember seeing a crowd enjoy themselves quite so much before. I think that was his words, or words to that effect. The third game that I'm going to report back on is when we played at home to Wolves. It was actually, I think, the second or third last game of the season. Yes, it was the third last game of the season. We've been on an amazing run we had. We really were actually winning loads and loads of games, but also playing some fantastic football. Walsh and Whittingham were in their absolute prime in that season. I think, was it Walsh got player of the season, and Whittingham scored, I think, nearly 47 goals or something like that. Absolutely extraordinary. But we were creating goals from so many other avenues as well. Those two are the ones who get all the headlines. But anyway, that Wolves game, it was another one of those tense affairs, and we finally found the breakthrough. I stood on the Milton end that game, and Ray Daniel put us in front, and the relief around Fratton Park when we took the lead was just absolutely unbelievable. You really did think after that, 2 games to go, 3 points clear, surely we're going to go and do it, surely this team's going to get us up into what was then the new Premier League at the time. We didn't, unfortunately, in the end. We did lose in the playoffs and we did miss out, of course, automatically. But it was one of those games I just remember, just the whole euphoria and the whole feeling of optimism that we're going to do it this year. We had to wait a bit longer, which I'll go on to next. Well, fast forward on 10 years then to the Rotherham United game, that magic Sunday night in April 2003. Although for many people it was a case of when rather than if we were going to go and win the league title, well, we very nearly threw it away because we lost a couple of games towards the end of that season. The Rotherham United game though, going into that, it was in our hands. If we won the game, we were champions. We were already up into the Premier League, but to go up as champions, that's the icing on the cake. I know Merson gave us a lead with the penalty and we got pegged back a couple of times whilst Todorov scored a couple of goals, our leading goal scorer that season, but we won 3-2 and it was just all your dreams that you ever thought would happen were finally happening as a Pompey fan. Southampton at home, always the game which every Pompey fan looks out for, but this season was extra different. Only 2 years ago, of course, Harry Redknapp, Jim Smith as his assistant, had got us up into the Premier League as champions. But they'd gone down the road to Southampton. There'd been a big fallout between themselves and the chairman, and they were free men. They could go wherever they want, really. Except for most Pompey fans, they did the most cardinal sin by going 20 miles to the northwest of us. Well, their return to Fratton Park was an epic one. I mean, have you ever seen a game where a team are 4-1 down in a local derby after 27 minutes? Well, it happened that day. Admittedly, their star striker, former Pompey player as well, Peter Crouch, was injured in the warm-up, which gave us a massive advantage going into it, but we absolutely destroyed him in that first 20-odd minutes. Even when they scored, it was against a run of play, and we were 4-1 up at half-time, and it finished 4-1 in the end. But the amount of chances we had, it could have been literally about 7 or 8. I know you don't score every chance, but it was just wow. I mean, no disrespect to Southampton if any of your fans are watching, but it was just one of those days which you just have to savour. Any fan, a local derby, an absolute annihilation of a team at home, that's the one you always remember, isn't it? And obviously the icing on the cake there with Harry and Jim making their return, and one or two bits of banter they got that afternoon, shall we say, but eventually these things would sort themselves out. Well, the next game I'm going on to is AC Milan in the UEFA Cup. Finally I pick a game that's not happening in the spring. Wow, this one was in November 2008. AC Milan were coming to Fratton Park. AC Milan with Ronaldinho, with Kaká, with Inzaghi, just to name a few. It was a dream of all dreams to actually be in that situation. None more so than the fact we actually went 2-0 up in that game. And there was only 5 minutes to go. I mean, we're going to beat the mighty AC Milan. But not quite, because 2 late goals saw us pegged back and it finished as a draw. We'd have taken that beforehand, but it was heartbreak but pride at the same time. So my final choice then of these 7, the magnificent 7 in my first 30 years of going to Fratton Park, has to be against Cheltenham Town on the last day of the 16-17 season at home. We've been again on an amazing run. Pompey often always seem to finish the season well. It tends to happen quite a lot. I think it's the good weather factor being down on the south coast. I've always thought that. But going into that game, we were already promoted, finally getting out of League 2, having had years of turmoil, dropping into the lower leagues, and everyone knows the club almost went out of business. But with PST in charge of the club, the fan-owned club, and Paul Cook as the very inspirational manager, we were back in League 1. We were finally promoted out of that basement league after 4 years. But what would finish it off very nicely is if we could go up as champions. It was out of our hands, of course, because both Plymouth Argyle and Doncaster Rovers had to had to fail to win, and also we had to, of course, beat Cheltenham to have any chance. With respect to Cheltenham, we were always probably likely to win that game at home. We did, it was 6-1 in the end. But having the tension of relying on results elsewhere, and the atmosphere, the noise coming through when the goals were going in from Grimsby and from Hartlepool, who both gave us a massive favour that day. And then suddenly things quieting down when they'd equalise, or whatever the case may be. But we were only top of the table for, I think, just over half an hour for the entire season, and it was on the last day. On the last day, we were champions. it was another one of those epic occasions. I don't like to say what was my favourite ever game at Fratton Park because they're all wonderful experiences in their own way, and they will be again. So for all the time we're not able to watch football, hope this has cheered you all up, hope it's given you all a trip down memory lane, and here's to making a recovery and getting our world back as we know it. So in the meantime, play up Pompey, and a very good day to you all from PL Presents.